Hello, and welcome to another episode of Magicians Only. Are you a magician? Yeah, you. I'm talking to you right there. You. Yeah, don't look at me like that. Wait, no, come back here. Are you a magician? Are you? Are you a magician? Do you want to be a magician? Do you want to buy some magic? If you want to buy some magic, I highly recommend Magic on the Go, the sponsor of this show. If you want to learn some magic, check out Magic on the Go. If you just want to get an idea of what it's like to be a magician, or you want to hear all about the crazy world, or maybe you're fascinated with what it takes to put on a show, this podcast, especially this episode, is the one for you. This is part 2 of How to Do a One-Person Show, and I'm telling you that Zoe, this conversation that we have, that she gives so much great, and I'm telling you that this conversation that we have, Zoe gives so much great advice. I highly recommend you get a notepad and you start writing down. Paper and pen. Don't type it into your phone because that doesn't connect properly to the brain. Paper, pen, paper, start writing it down, and you'll find it kind of sinks in a little better. But write down the things that resonate with you, and the things that maybe, if we were going to be super honest, you might need to work on. We all need to work on stuff. We all need to take notes. One of the most important things, and you'll see it throughout this entire interview, is I'm always talking about my show. And it's not because I'm being narcissistic, although they do say that a one-man show is the ultimate refuge of the narcissistic actor. It's all me. But that aside, the reason I keep talking about my show is because it's absolutely relevant to what we're talking about. Because while I was filming that with Zoe and I was there performing, every day we were going over notes, trying to make the show better. And every day we were having these genuine discussions on how to improve it. I've been doing magic since I was 5 years old. There's always room for improvement. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm just telling you right now, that's why I keep talking about it, to make it relatable, hopefully, to you by taking these kind of esoteric ideas and then actually putting them or showing you how we put them into physical practice. Okay. So please welcome back Zoe Ruth in part 2 of How to Do a One-Person Show. Okay, so I'm going to ask something which, again, we're not going to use names, okay? But I don't want to appear negative, but I think sometimes we can learn a lot from failures and from people's issues. So, in working with magicians now, because I've seen you work and I've heard you talk about rehearsing with magicians, giving notes to magicians, helping magicians find the transitions that keep the show going, which seem to be very important to you. What are your biggest frustrations? And really pay attention to this, because I think this is going to be quite eye-opening.
So one big thing that I hate to hear is, I can't rehearse that without an audience, or right. I don't know, I can only work on this in front of an audience. And I think that's an excuse. I think that's a cop-out. I think it's the other way around. I think you can't do this for an audience
if you haven't worked on it.
Yeah. And if you're doing it for an audience without working on it, you don't know if that worked or not, because you haven't put the time in.
And how do you even know why you're doing anything and what it's about? That's an amazing statement. I can't rehearse this without an audience. Think about that. Of course you can rehearse it. How do you think plays, stand-up comedians? I mean, stand-up comedians will rehearse a new bit in the middle of their act at 2 o'clock in the morning at a comedy club outside of New York because they want to try it. They're not going to do it on a paid gig where they're going to get up and give this a shot, right?
Yeah, and even if they're getting to that point where they're in front of an audience at 2 a.m., an audience of a drunk 5 people, you can be sure they have said those words out loud, maybe to a mirror, but they have said those words. They have massaged that sentence to be quick, concise, and punchy many times before they ever stood up on a stage.
So wait, so people have actually said to you, I'm not going to rehearse this, I can't do it until I get in front of an audience?
Yes.
That's actually happened?
Yeah. Yeah, and it is frustrating, especially as a producer.
Yes.
Because I then have so little to work on, especially because I do wear all these hats, and I'm often writing light cues and working with our technical advisors on sound cues and weaving more sound cues and more light cues in to kind of help support the theatricality of
which you can't do if they have no idea what they're going to do.
Yeah,
if
I can't get the vibe of that moment in an accurate way, if you can't recreate what the vibe of that moment is without a full house, there's
you're really cutting yourself short by doing that. You're not doing yourself any favors, because I know that in the show that we did, magic is, okay, you've got the skill level, you've got the presentation, but magic is furniture and pocket space. And if you don't know exactly where you're going to put a prop, how you're going to put a prop, are you going to drag that chair? Are you going to pick it up and put it in the corner? Is it going to get in the way of something else? Are you going to start stumbling over your tables? Like, where's that pen going to go? And is that going to get in the way of the wallet? Now, you have to know these things in full, which brings us, okay, so they don't want to rehearse, but it's the difference between practice and full rehearsal. I mean, I think there's a massive difference between those, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I also think, there's a difference between the magicians that, when they're pitching their show, they're giving me a list of tricks,
right,
which I could care less about.
Right.
I really could care less. If the first thing you're telling me is I'm going to do this trick and then this trick and then this trick, I'm immediately not very interested.
Okay.
If the way you're pitching your show is, this is the story I'm telling, this is the theme, this is the concept, I want to take people out into the woods and create a fireplace, a central fire that we're all gathered around, and
right.
I want to bring the audience to a place where they're comfortable standing up and sharing their dreams. I mean, I've heard nothing about
any magic. That sounds like a mentalism
magic
show to me. Let's put that together. Fire Pit. We'll call it Fire Pit, starring Steve Valentine. Copyright 2023. But it's a great idea. I mean, you're right. It's you can't deliver the best show that you can if you don't know where you're going to be and what you're going to do. And it sounds like an obvious thing, but this is also the difference between practicing a move and then doing that move in context to everything else that you're doing. Are you going to do a load? I have in the chocolate box trick, I have a load of chocolates into the box. And we've been working it all the last couple of weeks. Like, when is the best moment to do that? Is it while the people on stage are doing one thing? Should I wait till they're done? Should I come over here and then do it? And until you rehearse it, and with physically with the props, just get someone to be there in the audience for you. If you need someone to pretend to be an audience member, have a friend come in and do that for you, so that you've got an idea. And also, there's no way you can time your show. I think also I've seen a lot of people who just put like a dozen tricks in their bag and then say, I'm going to kind of work off the crowd and see what works, and if they're rambunctious, I'll move to this, and then that becomes just like a mess.
Yeah, I think the problem with that is that you haven't put thought into the roller coaster journey that you're taking your audience on ahead of time. Like, theater is about tension and release, and some pieces of magic create tension and then give you a release at the end. Others, like maybe, I keep bringing up Ambitious Card, you have this tiny bit of tension and then release, and then tiny bit of tension and then release. And so to think about, in the context of your whole show, how is there texture there? How is that roller coaster doing the same thing over and over and over and over again? Or do we have some variation?
Right.
Are we being given multiple different types of opportunities to
which you're not going to know unless you do it full out in rehearsal. There's a massive difference between rehearsal and practice. And I highly recommend that you guys, when you're working on your show, when you're working on your act, you do it full out when you rehearse. You don't just kind of like mark it, I'm going to say this and maybe I'll do it full out, so you can hear yourself say those words, so you can see how your body is going to be when you do the move. And also, as you're rehearsing, the best part of it is that new lines will come to you because you're rehearsing, and if you film it, there's something weird about putting a camera on and filming it and then watching it back later. When you're filming it, it will make you a little more anxious, and then you'll be a little more nervous, and then other material will come as you're performing, and you'll have a record of it, which is great.
Sure.
So magicians have a tendency not to rehearse, as we know this. They say this is why some of the greatest, most dangerous magicians are the ones who used to be jugglers, because they know how to practice. Charlie Fry is an amazing performer. He'd be great here, actually, Charlie. And he is an incredible juggler, and the magic he does is so incredibly brilliant and timed and skillful and funny, because he's got those circus skills, you know. So there's rehearsal practice. That's number one. That's been a big frustration for you. And notes. I think when I say notes, notes are somebody watches you do your show. They write down all the things that they think maybe could be improved. Maybe you flashed. Maybe that's obvious. Maybe that doesn't work. And then you sit down and you take those notes. So I have a particular opinion on this, but I want to throw this over to you first.
Yeah, so, I mean, as I mentioned, I come from the world of, like, acting, theater acting, and I would say most actors are so excited to get notes.
Why?
Because that's where you get to improve.
Right.
Those are those little meaty, detaily areas that you get to sink deeper.
Yeah.
You get to workshop. You get to try it a million different ways until something starts sparking something.
And it might be something you never thought of that turns something from being okay to fantastic, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's those little details that timing is often a big area that I love to study in notes.
The timing of a line, the timing of a joke, the timing of when a punchline
absolutely.
Or a trick
the timing
ends.
of when the lights come on. I mean, we did a little bit of that with you as well.
Yeah, we did. We did a lot of that with me. I took the notes, just so you know.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Mostly.
Yeah.
But I often find with magicians that don't come from a background of acting training, which, you know, is not necessarily. I don't think you need formal acting training to be an actor even, let alone a magician. But they maybe lack the same kind of excitement around these pieces that I can improve, and I think they can tend to take it personally, like, oh, I didn't do that good enough. It's not about good enough. It's about, are you achieving your intention in that moment?
Yeah, and
what is your intention?
What is your
in that
intention?
moment?
And here's the thing: you won't know exactly how something comes. It's like the same way of saying you really don't know how your voice sounds until you hear it played back to you. You know, you really don't know. My first experience with this was years ago in the early 90s at the Castle. There was a magician, and his name was Michael, and he asked me to give him a review of his show and give him notes on his show. And so I took it seriously, and I sat in the parlor, and I made all these notes, and we sat and had a beer afterwards. And he goes, well, you got anything for me? And I was like, right, yes. And I had all these pages, and I'm like, right, so... and he looked at me, and I gave him the first note, and he started shaking with anger and getting defensive. And I was like, listen, you don't have to take any of these. These are just things that I've noticed. And I stopped giving notes to magicians from that moment forward, because most don't seem to be able to take it. And I think it's the point of view. For me, a note is an opportunity to make your show better. It's got nothing to do with what you're doing badly.
Yeah.
Here's how you can improve. As long as they're constructive notes, and someone's not saying, you know, don't give up your day job. I've had that too. But as long as they're constructive, it's a gift. And if you can look at a note as a gift, give me another one, give me another one. I've had amazing people on this run here giving me notes. And they're really smart notes, things that I maybe would gloss over because I'm lazy, or because I don't see it, or because I'm focusing on something else. Look at a note, change your mindset, make it, don't take it personally. Be happy someone's taking the time to give you. Also, I would say, take notes from people you've asked. Ask people to give you notes. It doesn't mean you have to take notes from every Joe Blows. Like, you know, it'll be great in your show. You know what's wrong with your show. You're not asking for that. Make sure specifically you have someone you trust who can give you the note. And then accept it. When I was an actor, I'm an actor, but when I was last sitcom I was doing, I remember we were always getting notes. You always get notes after every scene, you know, and maybe you could just take out the word "and" on that. That'll be funnier if you just punch it there. Or, Steve, bring it down a little bit. That's too big. And for me, I was like, right, okay, got it. At no point was I like, well, actually, what I was going for there was I think it's better my way. There's no point in doing that. You've already done it your way. And it's such a gift. I just can't keep saying that enough. Try not to take it personally. But I know you've had a problem with people taking it personally, right? So how do you handle it?
Yeah, well, I would say, first of all...
When you see someone who, when you start giving them notes and you see them getting defensive and you see them tensing up, how do you handle that?
That can be hard, especially given my position. I mean, I am not the director of all of these shows.
Right.
So if an artist who's contracted to do a show here is not open to notes, then they're not open to notes, and I will back off. I will say, yeah, don't take it personally, and quite the opposite. I think for most artists, I'll speak for myself, but I would say this is probably true for most artists. If someone's giving you a note, that means they're seeing potential. They like your show. I don't give notes to shows I don't like.
Right, why bother?
I don't want to work on show. I don't want to work further on shows I don't like.
You don't want to make a turd. You don't want to shine a turd. We don't want to shine turds around here. It's like, that's really great. You know what to make it even better? This.
Yeah.
Or maybe do this and just kind of, maybe you don't see that note. Right now in my show, we have a debate about this moment, I should point out, where I do a very serious line and then I reprimand the audience and it gets a laugh because they don't realize what they're saying. Now, when I've been doing it, I've also been laughing with the audience as it's okay, I get it. And what everyone here has been telling me is it might be better to be very serious on this so the audience feels the guilt of that moment. And I'm trying to get there. I really am. But more than one person gave me this idea and they each backed the other person up. So tonight will be the night when I go full out to give it a shot.
I can't wait.
But this is, I accept the note, and I'll try and implement it and do my very best. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and you'll know, But you have to give it a shot. And I understand I have to give it. Everyone's like nodding their heads. I'll give it a shot, okay?
Well, it's the moment of tension and release, and
yeah.
I think the release is coming too soon for the audience.
See right there, you see? And then people in the back are going, yeah. Okay, Nate Staniforth. Do you know Nate? Are you aware of Nate Staniforth's work?
The name sounds very familiar.
He's amazing. He's one of my, as a magic hero of mine, a modern-day magic hero. I just read his book, Clouds and Kingdoms, and there's a whole chapter on tension and release. And he literally he graphs out every trick.
Yeah.
And he says, look at this. This is a build, and now this suddenly releases. Or this is a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, and now I'm not letting go until you're at a fever pitch. And what you're asking me to do in this moment in my show is don't let that go, right?
Yeah.
Keep that tension so that it has a bigger impact when it finally hits.
Well, because the eventual impact is the card stab that you talked about earlier in this interview.
Yeah, which is a violent boom, boom, boom moment.
Yeah,
very
and
angry, violent moment.
I think it earns a long hill up the roller coaster.
We'll see tonight.
Long, slow cranking.
A long cranking, yeah. Okay. Back here now, yeah. We're going to give it a shot. The best thing I learned, that's what I was going to say, the best thing I learned doing sitcom was that you sit and listen to the note and you ingest it and you don't immediately defend it, right? You don't defend yourself, you don't become defensive, you listen to what the person's saying and just let that sink for a moment. Don't respond. That way you get through all the notes relatively quickly and then you can address them when you're out working. Okay, that's amazing. So that's notes and that's rehearsal, two of the greatest frustrations in working with magicians. I think a lot of it, to be fair to magicians, I think a lot of it comes from we're such an insular business. You have an act, you rehearse in your living room, and you go out and you do it, and you don't really have other people to work with. And because we're in theatre, and there's so many, and I found this with the Illusionists, right? They were like, okay, they were directing me on material that I already knew. And I had to step back, drop the ego and say, okay, what do you guys need? And be collaborative. And out of that came some great new bits. Also timing. One of my biggest problems, I can go long because if I get someone on stage who's a bit cheeky or there's stuff happening, I'll go along with it. And then the next thing you know, I've added 10 minutes to the show. For me, with the frustration with the Illusionists would be that I'd have to do 10 minutes. I'd come off stage 15 minutes later because some lady I got up on stage was hilarious, and so we had to go with that bit. And I'm on a high. I'm coming off going, did you see that? That was amazing. We got a standing ovation. And everyone's like this. Yeah. Why? Because other people have things to do. Number one, they've got to get the show done in a certain time. And also, you could cost production or an event planner or someone who's throwing an event, you could cost them money because now everything goes longer because of you, and therefore you go into overtime. But the big thing for theater shows is you start going into time and a half and golden time, and that costs the production a lot of money. So sticking to your time is super important.
Well, also, you may also be costing the overall show. I keep talking about tension and release, but it's overall journey, right? Because if your 10 minutes has turned into 15, potentially that peak at the end of your piece is higher than the finale's piece, and by the time your audience has gotten to the finale, they're exhausted.
Right. And you've talked about that a lot, exhausting an audience. You mentioned that, and you've talked about that in music.
I think it's particularly important in magic, in the context of a magic show, because there are all these like applause cues, right? And in 90 minutes, like your show has 40 pieces of magic. And so that is a lot of clapping that someone is doing, clapping and responding. And it can be exhausting. And so to make sure you're managing the journey that your audience is going on in a way that keeps them receptive in every moment, doesn't allow for them to tune out because it's just too much.
Have you ever done a trick in your show where you think, this is a great trick, why are they not clapping for it? Maybe it's because they've clapped for a couple of things right up to that moment. I have a piece which I've been in my show, which is this Tournament Store poster, and we're trying to figure out why it doesn't get such a big response. And it's more of an emotional piece. It's kind of a clever written moment. And I'm beginning to realize now that right before I do that, I do my diminishing card routine where I'm like, ooh, love me. And I'm like getting the audience going. And so they've just had that big release. There hasn't been enough time to build up. And so they're tired. And that's an important thing to look at. But you also talked about when we were doing levels of music, and this was very educational for me. There are times when I'm just like, play the music, and Zoe's like, it's too loud. And if the music is too loud at that moment, they're going to get exhausted, right? You're going to trigger people. You're going to stress them out.
It's essentially overstimulation, right? If I've got too much going on, I can't have that journey, that release of your trick, because there's just still so much. So managing the technical side of that as well is important.
Super important. It's like if you're going to do a show and you make sure the microphone is loud enough, but it can't be too loud. If it's too loud, people are going to be really unhappy, right? And if it's not loud enough, they're going to try and listen, and then they're going to give up. So same with music. Is your music so loud that when you're talking over it, that nobody can hear you? Or are you drowning out the music when you speak? So again, this is where having someone to give you notes or direct or give you kind of technical stuff is invaluable. And
like, unless your intention in that moment is to exhaust your audience,
right?
That can be okay if that's your dramatic intention. Yeah. But just being intentional about it. Yeah. Right?
There's a moment in my show where we have this. I talk about an audience not paying attention to me, and we have a soundtrack of people talking. And it's not so low, it's not so loud that you can't hear me talking over it, but it's a certain volume because we want to trigger, we want to trigger that feeling that we all know, which is of being ignored, of trying to do a show when no one's paying attention. And by hearing that, it can really get to you. And then suddenly there's a moment of silence, which really, really strangely climaxes that beat. So those are really great notes. So we've got taking notes, we've got rehearsal, we've got exhausting an audience, making sure that you're not tiring out your audience, and making sure that you give peaks and valleys. And I highly recommend Nate's book. You study direction, right? So when you were studying direction, and theater or film?
Theater.
Live. What do you think would be an interesting tool maybe for people to give them an idea of what it? Maybe if you take a course into how to direct, you might understand how to apply those techniques to your work, as if you were going to read like a book on screenplays or theater writing, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's hard. I mean, the best experiences for me were to work with different directors who used different styles of direction. For sure. There are so many paths towards it that it's hard to say what's going to be helpful for anybody.
Okay.
But I'd have to. Can I get back to you with some stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put it in the show notes. And you know what? There's any other kind of artistic class that you can take. So take a class in writing, take a class in direction, but also why not take a class in lighting, right? You can understand how lights change mood, and we've done quite a lot of light cues in this show.
Yeah, and I was always really inspired by Grotowski's study of acting, which is movement first, and I feel like that's very apropos for magic, because magic is so movement based. It is like choreographing dance.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, even a choreography class, a dance class might be helpful.
Get in touch with your body, because I think a lot of magicians have a tendency to think that the trick is here, right? When really the trick is everything. It's all of you. You know, the difference between, if you're going to, I'll talk about a move, but if you're going to do a top change on a card, some people are here like this and they'll go like that, right? But then the energy, the tension is right here, which also triggers everyone, shows everyone where to look. But if your body is moving, to the, you know, there was a guy called Paul Rossini who was a magician from the 40s who used to practice his tricks to various waltzes, and so he would get the timing of the piece, so he knew that there was no pause when he did his move.
I would say another so college, it's all coming back to me now.
Here we go, right? It's all coming back.
But
Free course.
Reading Beckett plays, Samuel Beckett plays, was really helpful for directing, because he writes every piece of stage choreography, every piece of blocking is in his script itself.
Read that, and then read Pinter, who writes nothing.
Yeah.
Who gives you nothing but the words, and you have to figure out what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
And fill those gaps in for yourself. Both of those are kind of extremes, right?
Yeah, for sure. And to me, I mean, Samuel Beckett just wanted to direct his own shows, you know? He wanted that bit of control, because the movement was as important to telling the story as the words.
That I've seen that in some J.B. Priestley work as well, where he'll actually have a moment where he says he moves to the corner, pours himself a drink, takes out a cigarette box, lights a cigarette, takes a breath. Like, it's his way of saying, take a beat, but he's giving you the beats. And those beats can be very important, you know. There's a magician called Bob Austin in England who was famous for close-up magic, and we recently found a tape of him being interviewed, and we were stunned to find that he used to do the vanishing birdcage, which I do. And one of the problems that he had with it as an opening trick was that it's over very quickly, and if people aren't watching, they miss the trick. It's the problem with visual magic in general. And in his interview, he discovered that if he paused, so if he came out and said, okay, the incredible vanishing birdcage, this is going to vanish on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, and it was gone, people would miss it. But if he went 1, 2, well, that got you to look. 3. That change in the moment sold the trick. Same as if you do a tournament store newspaper with a flash opening. If you have that pause right before you open it, it's way more powerful.
Yeah.
It brings the attention in.
Know when you're going to breathe. I mean, Shakespeare did this, right? If you breathe at the end of every line of Shakespearean iambic pentameter, you're going to act it better. It's just going to naturally be better. Yeah. And so if you look at your own scripting, your own movements, and decide where you're going to breathe.
Where you're going to breathe. Because quite often we don't, do we? We're on stage, we're tense, we're told, you know, and you can hear some magicians do, they're so tense that you can hear them take the breath, which you don't want to do. So maybe vocal classes will be important. And I think there's a technique called the Alexander technique, which I think is amazing.
Yeah,
right?
Alexander is very cool for finding ease in your body and movement. I would say if you're interested in vocal techniques, I would highly recommend Linklater.
It's a hell of a book to get through, but it's
it's super all-encompassing, though. It is very much voice and movement, and how those two things work together.
How it connects with the body.
And how those two things can connect to your own personal story as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very in-depth, and that was probably some of the best.
Yes, I remember there were some exercises where you were just lying on the floor, and you're getting into, which, you know, you think vocal is just right here, but it's not.
It's not. It's your whole body.
Tension is the killer, I think. And tension will also reveal your secrets if you're not careful. If we tense up right before we do a move, if we tense up right before we're going to do something secret, we can tell the audience what's about to happen, and you don't want that. Any last thoughts as far as like putting together? I mean, we've really covered a lot, which has been amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
Your
I mean, I hope it
knowledge.
Made sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
Kind of way.
Because it's coming from what I loved about, because we've already had some of these conversations, and what I loved about it was that Zoe is coming from a perspective, a theatrical perspective, which is the effect of your show on an audience, not at all the magic tricks. And it's so different. And I hope that you've got a lot out of this, and we'll re-listen to this over and over again. But is there any final thoughts? I mean, definitely if you're going to send in a tape, make sure it's of the whole show. Let's not waste anyone's time.
Or at least has some, you know...
Okay, I'm being brutal on that, but all right.
Meatiness to it,
Some
right?
meatiness,
yeah.
meatiness to it.
I would just say, you know, innovate. Don't be afraid to risk take. Something brand new that sucks is always going to be better than something overdone that's
mediocre.
Yeah, and be vulnerable, you know, get on stage and be vulnerable, put yourself in uncomfortable situations and see what blossoms from that.
We're in a great time right now, I think, for magic, where when I was growing up in magic in the early my 20s, it was all about the act, and most of the time in England you needed to get in front of an audience that was maybe loud and rough and drunk and full of hecklers, and you needed to get their attention, you needed to blow them away with magic, and you needed to get off. We don't seem to be as much in that world now. There's so many other avenues, so many places which are allowing magic to blossom in a way it never has before. This venue, Liberty Magic, being to me kind of the epitome of what you can do if you respect magic and if you give it a place to flourish. And we have 6 different one-person shows here in a season, and the audience gets to see and decide for themselves the kinds of magic that they like. So if you're working on your show, imagine that you're working here. You don't want to do anything that other people are doing. You want to present something that makes you look at the best you can possibly look, and it has a lot of thought to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bam! Wasn't that great? Thank you, Zoe, for taking the time and sitting down with me. She was running a theater with dealing with so many different things. You've no idea. Just getting that hour or so to sit down with her and for her to focus and give us that great information. I will always be super grateful. I can't wait to come back and do another run at Liberty Magic in Pittsburgh. If you find yourself in Pittsburgh, go check out a couple of the shows. You're going to be glad that you did. Coming up soon is the episode where I interview Bill Abbott of Bill Abbott Magic, the man who not only is a great performer and a great magic dealer, he sells a lot of awesome magic and makes the tables that I actually use now in my show with these amazing tops. But Bill has his own magic theater. This is the next step. This is the next level up from what we're talking about. Not working in someone else's theater, but creating your own. We're going to be talking to Bill about how he did that, how he put it all together. And I'm telling you, he really tips the goods. So be sure to check out. It's a 2-parter coming up very soon with Bill Abbott. Finally, I'd like to leave you with this. 100 years ago, almost exactly 1924, the most famous magician in England was a guy called David Devant. He was loved. He was beloved by the public because he did everything with kindness. People loved him more than any other magician. He was known as one of the most entertaining performers that London ever had. And he wrote something about this. Now, bear in mind that he wrote this in an article in 1924. So this is some final thoughts to think about when it comes to performing shows, presenting shows, and engaging and entertaining an audience. Here we go. I'm going to read this to you. The great public of the future will want something more than magic to magical entertainment. Even now, the cry is for entertainment. Amuse us. Take us out of ourselves. The magician who can do this finds that the public do not care greatly if the tricks are costly, cheap, complicated, or simple, as long as the performer is really entertaining. I imagine the audiences of the future will be even more exacting in their demands in this matter of entertainment than the audiences of today, and that the magician who fails to recognize that fact will go under. Progression in the art of magic there must be, there will be, but I imagine that the improvements will not only be solely in magic itself, but in the manner in which the magician presents his mysteries to an audience. David Devant, 1924. You're not wrong.